police say a woman was stabbed to death, and now we're hearing from officers about why the suspect says he did it.
Our cameras were rolling as
You're Antonio Morse.
accused of killing 65-year-old Rita Loncharich
Murder, first degree, premeditated, no bond.
made his first appearance in court. Police say Monday night, Moore came here to the Barnes & Noble at the Legacy Place shopping complex and stabbed Rita once in the back.
I was like really shocked. I was like, wait, really?
Joey Bowie works around the corner.
I'm sure you've probably been in that Barnes Noble.
Oh yeah, almost 100 times.
He told me he thought maybe Moore and Rita had an argument prior to the stabbing.
Another theory was, or she was rude to him, and then that's why he was holding a grudge maybe.
According to his arrest report, Moore told police there was no prior interaction with Rita or motive. There was an internal buildup that led to his fight or flight response kicking in, with Rita being the closest person.
It's scary, it's very scary. I feel like just my house is the safest part now.
On the evening of December 22nd, 2025, just 3 days before Christmas, shoppers wandered through Legacy Place, a bustling shopping center in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. Inside the Barnes & Noble bookstore, the smell of coffee and fresh pages filled the air. Families browsed holiday gift ideas, couples flipped through bestsellers, and one woman sat quietly reading a magazine. Her name was Rita Loncharich, 65 years old, a kind and gentle soul from Stuart, Florida. In moments, a knife would pierce her back, left lodged there by a complete stranger who would tell police he had no reason for what he'd done. Rita would manage one final phone call to her husband before dying on an operating table less than 2 hours later. If this story already has your heart racing, and you want more cases like this that demand attention and justice, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button, subscribe to She's Alive, and smash that bell icon. Because when you don't, cases like Rita's stay buried in the noise, and the victims deserve better than that. Let's make sure their stories are heard. Rita B. Loncharich wasn't supposed to die that night. She was simply doing what millions of people do during the holiday season, taking a quiet moment for herself in a bookstore. She lived in Stuart with her husband, also named Stuart, and by all accounts, she was the kind of person who radiated warmth. Friends and family would later describe her on social media as a loving wife and mother, someone who brought gentleness into every room she entered. She wasn't wealthy or famous. She didn't have enemies. She was just Rita, living an ordinary life in South Florida. And on that Sunday evening, she decided to stop by Barnes & Noble at Legacy Place. Legacy Place sits in Palm Beach Gardens, a city known for its upscale shopping, golf courses, and relative safety. It's the kind of place where people feel comfortable letting their guard down, where you might run into neighbors picking up last-minute gifts or grabbing dinner. The shopping center hosts familiar chains and local favorites, and Barnes & Noble anchors one corner of the complex at 11380 Legacy Avenue. On any given evening, you'd find students studying at the cafe, parents reading with their children in the kids section, and people like Rita simply enjoying the quiet refuge a bookstore provides. That particular Sunday evening around 7:53, Rita sat absorbed in her magazine. She had no idea that across the same store, a man named Antonio Roderick Moore, 40 years old, sat charging his phone. Moore had arrived in Palm Beach Gardens only about a week earlier, traveling by bus from Georgia. He was homeless, living in the woods near the shopping center. He had no history of violent crime. He didn't know Rita. He'd never spoken to her, never seen her before that night. But according to what he would later tell police, something inside him was building, some internal pressure he couldn't name or control. What happened next unfolded in seconds, but would shatter lives forever. Moore stood up, walked across the bookstore, took a fixed-blade knife from his jacket, and without warning, without words, stabbed Rita Loncharich in the back. Witnesses would later tell police they heard Rita cry out in shock, saying simply, "He stabbed me." The knife remained lodged in her back as Moore turned and ran from the store, disappearing into the night while Rita, bleeding and terrified, reached for her cell phone. Think about that for a second. Your last conscious act being to warn someone you love that you've been hurt. What do you even say in that moment? Rita managed to dial her husband, Stuart. Can you imagine that phone call? The panic in her voice, the confusion, trying to explain what just happened while the pain is searing through your body. Stuart, sitting at home in Stuart, Florida, suddenly hearing his wife tell him she's been stabbed in a bookstore. No context, no explanation that makes sense, just pure chaos breaking into what should have been an ordinary Sunday evening. By the time store employees and other customers rushed to help Rita, she was already losing consciousness. Someone called 911, and within minutes, Palm Beach Gardens police officers arrived at the scene, finding Rita unresponsive with that knife still embedded in her back. First responders immediately began life-saving efforts right there on the bookstore floor. Fire rescue transported her to St. Mary's Medical Center in West Palm Beach, racing against time. Surgeons did everything they could, but the damage was too severe. At 9:22 that night, less than 2 hours after she'd been reading her magazine in peace, Rita Loncharich was pronounced dead. Her husband Stuart had to process the unthinkable. His wife went to browse a bookstore and never came home. 3 days before Christmas. Think about how that family's holidays are forever changed now. Every December, every Christmas decoration, every bookstore they pass will carry that weight. Meanwhile, back at Legacy Place, police had a crime scene to process and a suspect to find. Witnesses gave descriptions of the man who'd run from the store. Surveillance footage captured him clearly, showing his clothing and the direction he fled. Officers spread out around the shopping center, searching the surrounding area. About 1,500 feet from Barnes and Noble, in the woods where Moore had been living, they found him. He was still wearing the same clothes visible in the surveillance footage. When officers approached, Moore didn't resist. He didn't run. He was arrested without incident and taken into custody. Now here's where this case gets even more disturbing. During questioning, Moore didn't deny what he'd done. He admitted everything. He told investigators that he'd been sitting in the Barnes and Noble charging his phone when he decided to approach Rita and stab her with his pocket knife. But when detectives asked the obvious question, why, Moore's answer sent chills through everyone in that interrogation room. He said he had no motive. None. He didn't know Rita. They'd never interacted. He had nothing against her personally. Moore explained that he'd experienced some kind of internal buildup and his fight or flight response kicked in, and Rita just happened to be the closest person in the store. Let that sink in for a moment. You could be that closest person. I could be. Any of us walking through our daily routines could randomly become someone's target because of something happening entirely in their head. Detectives dug deeper into Moore's background, trying to make sense of this senseless act. They discovered he had no history of violent crime. This wasn't a career criminal or someone with a rap sheet full of assaults. He'd traveled from Georgia about a week before the attack, had been homeless in Palm Beach Gardens, living in those woods near the shopping center. Police later told Stuart Loncharich that Moore had a history of mental illness, which explained some of the randomness, but certainly didn't excuse it. Moore was booked into Palm Beach County Jail at approximately 5:30 in the morning on December 23rd. The charges came down hard and fast. First-degree premeditated murder. That's the most serious murder charge possible in Florida, carrying potential life in prison or even the death penalty. On Wednesday morning, Moore made his first court appearance before Judge Donald Haffel, who looked at the case file and simply called it tragic. Moore is being held without bond, which means he's not going anywhere while this case moves through the legal system. What do you think goes through someone's mind in that courtroom moment? Does Moore even fully understand what he's done? Or is whatever was happening in his head still clouding everything? The investigation continues as police work to build their case, but they've been respectful about timing. With the holidays and the family's grief so fresh, officers announced they'd wait before releasing additional updates, saying more information would come in the following days. Meanwhile, the community response has been exactly what you'd expect when random violence shatters the illusion of safety. People who regularly shop at Legacy Place, who grab coffee at that Barnes and Noble, who consider it their safe space, suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders. One local worker who frequents the store told reporters it's scary, very scary, and right now her house feels like the only safe place. Another customer put it bluntly when they said it's terrible that anybody can't walk into a regular store without being fearful of being stabbed. That's the ripple effect of crimes like this. It's not just Rita's family who suffers. It's every person who now hesitates before sitting down in a public place to read, every parent who grips their kid's hand a little tighter in stores, every employee who wonders if they're next. Legacy Place Management released a statement expressing deep sadness over Rita's death, saying they're working closely with law enforcement, enhancing their on-site security presence, and reviewing safety protocols with all their tenants. But here's the hard truth. You can add all the security guards you want, install more cameras, train staff on emergency response, and it still won't prevent someone determined to act on violent impulses from hurting people. That's the terrifying reality we're all living with. Mental health services are stretched thin, homeless populations struggle without adequate support, and then tragedies like this happen, and we all act surprised. As of right now, Antonio Moore sits in jail awaiting trial for first-degree premeditated murder. The legal process will unfold over months, maybe years. There will be psychiatric evaluations, competency hearings, probably debates about whether Moore understood the nature of his actions. His defense team will likely argue diminished capacity due to mental illness. Prosecutors will argue that premeditation existed in those moments when he walked across the store, pulled out his knife, and chose Rita as his victim. A jury will eventually decide his fate, but no verdict will bring Rita back. No prison sentence will give Stuart his wife back or give Rita's children their mother back. No amount of justice really balances these scales, does it? The broader questions this case raises are ones we desperately need to address as a society. How do we handle people experiencing mental health crises who are living on the streets? What resources exist to intervene before someone crosses that line from internal struggle to external violence? Moore told police about an internal buildup, a fight or flight response triggered by nothing external. That suggests someone who needed psychiatric help but wasn't getting it. We can't arrest people for thoughts or feelings, but we also can't ignore warning signs until someone dies. Where's the line? How do we protect both individual rights and public safety? For Rita's family, Christmas 2025 will be marked forever by her absence. Every holiday season going forward carries this trauma. For the community, there's a lost sense of security that may never fully return. For all of us watching this case unfold, it's a reminder that violence doesn't always make sense, doesn't always have a clear motive we can understand, and therefore protect ourselves against. Sometimes bad things happen to good people for no reason at all except that someone else's mind broke in a particular way at a particular moment. So I want to leave you with some questions to think about and discuss in the comments. What responsibility does society have to intervene when someone is clearly struggling with mental illness, but hasn't committed a crime yet? How would you cope if random violence took someone you love during a routine errand? And what changes could actually prevent cases like this? Or are we just accepting that some level of random violence is inevitable in modern life? Really think about those questions because they matter. They matter for Rita's memory, they matter for future potential victims, and they matter for how we build our communities going forward. If this case moved you, if Rita's story deserves to be shared, hit that share button right now. Drop your thoughts in the comments because I want to hear your perspective on this. And if you haven't already subscribed to She's Alive, do that now so you don't miss when we cover more cases that need attention. Check out the other videos on the channel where we dive deep into stories that demand justice and keep these conversations alive. Because the more we talk about these cases, the more pressure we put on systems to change, and the more we honor victims like Rita by refusing to let their stories fade into silence. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.